So we continue with our special focus this week on the two-pot retirement system. It kicks off on the 1st of September and many questions remain about how it's going to work and what its implications will be. Well, to discuss some of the issues, I'm joined by Lize de la Harpe. She's the Senior Legal Advisor at Corporate Finance at Sanlam Corporate. Thank you so much, Lize, for joining us. So given your legal knowledge, many questions are being asked about the implications of the new two-pot retirement system in the case of people going through a divorce. What's your understanding?
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here. I think Richard, in the insert there, made some very valid points. We are sitting with a situation now where the Pension Funds Amendment Act says one thing and the Divorce Act says another. And I think he made such a good point where he said, at the end of the day, when parties are getting divorced and they show up at the court, the court making that divorce order is going to be turning to the Divorce Act, because that's where the definition determines how you calculate this. So it's not up to the fund to make a decision of how this pension interest is calculated, which is what they've now tried to do by amending the Pension Funds Amendment Act, is you're actually going to sit with, as Richard also pointed out, you could have one judge say, right, the Divorce Act hasn't been amended, we're working with the Divorce Act as it stands today. And then you might have another which says, no, clearly the Pension Funds Act has been amended and we're using that. And that could have very different outcomes in what your calculation is. For example, also your retirement annuity funds. Currently, there's a different calculation to how you calculate pension interest in a retirement annuity fund. It's not what's sitting in the fund today. It's actually all of your contributions up to the date of divorce plus simple interest. Whereas if you're following the Pension Funds Amendment Act, the way it's worded there now, it's going to be whatever's sitting in the fund credit now. So if I can maybe give a bit of advice in inverted commas there to financial advisors and to attorneys that are dealing with clients that are busy getting divorced, is to keep this in mind, that while this legal uncertainty is there, we can't say with absolute certainty what a court will rule. Now, for those that do work with divorces and for those that don't know, what are the requirements to have an enforceable divorce order that you can enforce against your member spouse's pension fund? Is one of the requirements is you must reflect either a percentage or an exact amount. So my advice, if I was still sitting in the practicing field as an attorney, would be to advise clients, especially the ones that are settling, you know what, let's do our calculations and we insert an amount instead of putting in a percentage, because then this point becomes moot. Then there's no reason for the fund to get involved in the actual calculation thereof. You make it easier for the court and you might actually achieve the outcome.
This is very interesting indeed. And as you say, really currently it's an unknown quantity. Another issue that's caused a lot of confusion is the 10% or the 30,000 limit that's often been publicized in the initial seeding of the savings pot. People have been under the impression that they'll be limited in terms of what they can access. And of course, Richard did allude to the fact that you can access it in its entirety. I'd like your comments on that as well.
Okay, so first and foremost, I think it's important that we stress that you are going to, when you get a divorce order against your spouse's pension fund, let's say, for example, I was awarded 150,000 Rand of my husband's pension fund, the fund itself will deduct that proportionally. So 50,000 Rand will come from the savings pot, 50,000 from the retirement pot, and 50,000 from the vested pot. So it's not a case of you won't be able to get a portion from the retirement pot. It's going to be deducted proportionally. The risk is, of course, that the member does go and exercise that right once a year to empty out their savings pot, which thereby then reduces the amount that the non-member spouse claims. I think that's where it's very important, again, for financial advisors and for attorneys to take notice of this, is that even though the member, in terms of the new legislation, has a right to, once in a tax year, make a deduction from this savings pot, the fund has the right to restrict that access where the fund is aware of a divorce proceedings that's currently been instituted. So if your client is busy getting divorced or you are in the process of getting divorced, it's best to inform the pension fund administrator as soon as possible, because obviously they won't know if they're not informed that divorce proceedings are actually already on the way.
Yeah. Now, of course, there's been a massive educational drive right across the country, including us as SABC, in trying to get people up to speed about what the two-pot retirement system is all about. And one of the things, of course, that I think has really sunk in for a lot of people is the taxation, you know, the extent to which the money is going to be taxed. And people are feeling that this might not be a good idea after all.
It's such a good point that you're making, because remember, at the end of the day, the very object of a retirement fund is to make provision for you for when you retire, or either for your dependents if you pass away. So that's the absolute point of why we have something like this in our country. But during COVID especially, but this has been a long time coming, but we have seen that, you know what, there's a careful balance between preserving for one day and actually the financial circumstances that many South Africans face, where they really are under tough economical times. So an emergency could happen. It could happen that the only asset for many South Africans, it's the case that your biggest asset is actually the money sitting in your fund. So what Treasury has tried to do is equate a good balance between helping you preserve for retirement, not cashing out every time you resign, but then at the same time offering you limited access. One thing that's extremely important to remember, though, is that you are going to be taxed at your marginal rate, which is a serious amount of tax. You know, it could be as much as 45%. So, and also, I think very important is the loss that you are making on the compound interest that you can earn on that until retirement. You know, if you're close to retirement, you couldn't possibly make that money back. And even, you know, I've had the question where people say, you know, can I put it back? So let's say I have an emergency this year. Can I just next year when I've got a bit of a lump sum, a bonus, can I put it back? Remember, any contribution you make, even if it's a voluntary lump sum, it's going to be split across the savings pot and the retirement pot. So at best, you can only put a third of your savings pot back.
Yeah. Lize, one last thing. Is Sanlam Corporate and the Sanlam Group at large, is it ready for the 1st of September? Is it all systems go?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've been working tirelessly. We've made sure that we have developed lots of useful tools for members. There's an online calculator as well, where you can actually have a simulation done of, if I want to make a withdrawal, what is the tax I'm going to pay on it? What is the fee? And also, how much would I actually have to add in future to make up for this loss? We've done various infographics, videos, member communications to employers. No, we're absolutely on top of this.
Excellent. Lize de la Harpe, she is the Senior Legal Advisor at Corporate Finance at Sanlam Corporate. Thank you so much for speaking to us.